Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're so excited to have you here with us today. My name is Malia. I am currently serving as the president of Ignite UTEP. And Ignite is a nationally based nonpartisan organization, and our whole goal is to empower women to run for political office. So we are continuing our series, Women Who Ran, where we interview local leaders and elected officials throughout the city who have run for political office. And again, our whole goal is to just inspire everyone to become leaders in their own area and fields, and also hopefully run for office. So today we are going to have three executives from Ignite UTEP go ahead and interview Susie Byrd, who we're so thankful that she is here with us today. So I will hand it off to them.
Hi everybody, my name is Sofia Valenzuela. I'm the community liaison, and thank you for joining us today, Miss Susie, and thank you everybody else as well. Andrea?
Hi everyone, my name is Andrea Sanchez. I am the executive assistant for Ignite. And again, thank you all for being here. Sorry, Josie.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Jocelyn, but you can call me Josie. I am serving as vice president, and I'm excited to interview Miss Susie Byrd.
All right, I'll go ahead and continue with the bio. So Ignite is a nationally based bipartisan organization that encourages young women to become politically equipped and educated. We believe that there is political power in every young woman. Ignite UTEP is proud to continue our Women Who Ran 915 series this spring. Women Who Ran 915 is a webinar series featuring women political leaders in El Paso, Texas. We are honored to have Susie Byrd as our February Women Who Ran 915. Susie Byrd is currently a consultant with the El Paso Chamber, working in partnership with UTEP's Aerospace Center and WMKEC Center for 3D Innovation to create jobs and businesses and opportunities in aerospace, defense, and advanced manufacturing. Susie has a long history of public service, more recently as a district director of Congresswoman Veronica Escobar. She has ran and won elected office 4 times, including 2 terms as a city council representative for District 2 and 2 terms as EPISD trustee for District 3. She has also worked on many campaigns, including a campaign manager for Mayor Raymond Caballero, campaign manager for Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, and field director for Congressman Beto O'Rourke. Ignite will be interviewing Susie Byrd on her journey to and throughout politics, including what led her to pursue this career and her experience running and holding office.
Great. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so happy for your interest in contributing your gifts and your talents to our community and to through public service. I just think it's a really incredible journey. It's really important work, and I encourage everybody with a heart for our community to really consider running for office or serving in public office in an appointed position. So I'm really excited to visit with you today.
Thank you, Ms. Byrd. So we'll go ahead and continue with the interview portion. And with that, I'll go ahead and begin the questioning. So first and foremost, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Like, where are you from?
Great. Well, I am mostly from El Paso. I grew up here. Before I was 7 years old, we lived in 14 places, starting in Colorado where I was born. And then the minute my parents got here to El Paso, we just landed and we stayed. And so I've been here ever since. I live in Central El Paso. In fact, I live right next door to the house that I grew up in and the house where my mom and dad live. So I didn't wander too far. I went to Crockett Elementary. I went to Austin High School. And then I went away to university at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, which taught me a lot about myself, including what was comfortable and what was home to me, and primarily that El Paso was the place that I wanted to live and raise my family. And so I came back, and that's where, and I worked for, let's see, I worked for many, many years with my family's publishing business. I was the director of marketing and publicity for Cinco Puntos Press. And then that's where I started. Right after that is where I started in politics, and I'll save that for a little bit later.
Sophia, do you want to go ahead with the next question?
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so well, you already answered where you attend college, but what did you did as your major in college?
Oh, you know, I did nothing that's applicable to what I do today. I was a psychology major with a minor in English. And I think for me, I've always been very interested in people, which is why I chose psychology. And I have learned a lot about people through my journey in politics and public service that probably I couldn't have learned if I had pursued therapy or psychology, but it was a good foundation, I think, for me to just for me, my dad was really adamant that I get a liberal arts degree and kind of stick with it. And so, that's what seemed to make sense then. But probably it wasn't the journey that I ended up on.
So, considering that your major in college was psychology, what exactly led you into the realm of politics?
So it's interesting. I 20 years ago, kind of around this time period is when I really got involved in politics, and I started working with a man who became our mayor, Ray Caballero. And one of the things that we were working on was access to capital for small businesses. Like, that was a really critical at that point in time. Small businesses were really struggling in our community. And it was primarily as a result of the fact that we had so many large multinationals with most of the deposits in the community. And because of that, our local small businesses had a really hard, there was not as many community banks, the credit unions weren't lending to small businesses. And we wanted that to become an issue that everybody cared about. It's kind of a boring issue, except if you're a small business, then it's a really important issue. But we wanted other people to think about it. So we started the Fair Lending Coalition. And Ray Caballero was a real leader in that effort. He had really challenged the banks to do better, had challenged the community to do better, to really think about trying to build or recruit more kind of local community-based banks to our community to support our small businesses. And so one of the things we're having some coalition meeting, we're trying to figure out like what we do. We talked about, one way to raise this issue and to make people care about it with the mayor and city council races were coming up. Maybe we'd host a forum, which we did. And then as we were going through that process, he talked about the fact that, if you really want everybody to care about your issue, the best way to do that is to run a campaign. And for me, that idea always stuck with me because I've seen so many candidates that they're not really driven necessarily by they want to serve their community, but there's not a thing that they want to do. And I just love that idea that, you might not win a race, but you can, by knocking on a bunch of doors, by attending a bunch of forums, by sending out a bunch of mailers, you can really raise the profile of an issue that's really important to you and move the needle on that issue in a way that's really impactful. So, so he says, somebody has to run for office. So we're sitting around the room and we're like, who's going to run for office? And he was the most logical one. He had retired. He was a very successful trial attorney. He was pretty well known in the community. Had been doing a lot of public policy work with Senator Shapley at that time, and so he decided to run for mayor. And so as we were going through that process, I was working for my family's publishing company, and he asked me to be his campaign manager, which made sense because none of us had ever run a campaign before, so I don't know exactly what I was doing at that point. So I ran his campaign. He won, and we had a team. None of us knew what we were doing. I still remember to this day, like getting a call from somebody like, "Hey, Susie, what about the vans for early voting?" And I was like, "What? Like, what about the?" Like, I just, we didn't quite know what we were doing. But the remarkable thing about that particular election, and it's unfortunate that so somebody needs to go back and really understand and look at it. But in mayor's races that normally happened in May, you normally would get 28,000, 35,000 people to come out and vote. That was the pattern before, that was the pattern after. There was something about what he was saying that the community was so hungry for. I mean, he was saying, look, we need to leave mediocrity behind. We need to aim high. We need more ambition. We need to be excited about who we are as a community. We need to be excited about the fact that we live on the border. We need to be excited about the fact that we're bilingual. And 120,000 people came out and voted in that election. We never saw those people again in mayoral races. And so he really, we had 350 volunteers. People were just amped up and excited. And we didn't know how to run a campaign, but the message so resonated with people, and that idea about what can and should do for El Paso was so brilliant that it just drove people to the polls. It was really an amazing election. So that's how I started in politics, was with that race. And a lot of people that I knew in politics, so Congresswoman Veronica Escobar was a volunteer on that campaign, one of the best volunteers I've ever had on any campaign. And then Congressman Beto O'Rourke was he was running Stanton Street at that point, which was like a weekly online magazine and covering the campaign. So that's how I met him. So a lot of people that I know in politics, I've kept, I kind of met at that moment in time.
Thank you for sharing your experience. That's such a unique and inspiring experience. Based on that, do you think that that's when you discovered the leader within that has the potential for public office, or do you have another specific experience?
I own it. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm bossy. It's something I've had since the beginning of time, and probably what I've had to learn in my path towards leadership is that I'd like to insert myself and kind of help navigate and guide people and move things a certain way. And I think every position that I've held, and that one in particular, because it was like 350 volunteers, and a lot of them wanted to be like part of like the brain trust of the campaign, and I just needed them to be knocking on people's doors and calling people on the phone and standing on the side of the road with signs. And so I think I got better. I've gotten better over time about sort of I don't know what the word is, but like, allowing my voice to be part of the conversation. And, then also recognizing, I think part of leadership is also recognizing when other people are, when to bring other people along and help them to also, we need so many leaders. We just need and which is why I'm so excited to be talking to you. We just need so many people participating and lending their talents and their gifts to this community, that we need people that not only are good at leading, but are also good at incorporating everybody's voice in the process.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing your experience. I know that in an earlier response, you mentioned that Mr. Caballero was, a mentor to you, but was there any woman in particular who essentially helped you realize your importance in public service? And if so, what are the qualities that you admire about her?
Yeah. So actually, Ray was a mentor. So Ray was this remarkable campaigner. He was a mentor to me as a politician in that he taught me everything you shouldn't do. By the way, he was not reelected. He wanted to be in his office, not connecting to people, and so it was not. He was really brilliant in many ways, but didn't succeed as a politician, unfortunately, because he had beautiful ideas. But the person really for me that I think of as a mentor in politics, and somebody whose work I admire, and I learned so much from watching her, is Congresswoman Veronica Escobar. We have often said we're very good friends. That we were at like the State of the Army address, and they were talking about this term battle buddies, like you kind of go to battle with, like your buddies that you go to battle with. She's always been a battle buddy for me, but a real mentor in many ways, because she's tough. So even as a friend, really tough on you, like really holds you to account if she disagrees with you or feels like you're kind of headed in the right direction. She's also really inspiring. Like she's I think one of the things actually that I learned probably the most from her, and it served me the most when I was on the EPISD board. So she, prior to being the congresswoman, she was worked at the county. She was the county judge, and before that, the county commissioner. And when she was the county commissioner, she was by herself on that board, and there was just rampant corruption, for everybody to see. But she was the only one that was willing to say anything, and she was the only one willing to hold people accountable. And so she really stood alone. And so I used to call her like the majority of one. Like she would manage to make her voice so loud in the process, and her tactics at bringing in the community and the media so impactful that she ended up moving the needle, even though she was really by herself in so many ways. And so I learned a lot about that, particularly when I served on EPISD board, because I was in many ways kind of alone on that board, not all the time, but in some really important critical areas. And then she's also just tough as nails, and like courageous, and she's somebody I've learned the most from, I think, in politics. And she and I learned the same lessons from working for Ray Caballero. She was the communications director for Ray Caballero when he became mayor, and I was the executive assistant and economic development and housing assistance. And he didn't want to communicate, so it was like this like miserable job being his communications director. We both learned. I think everybody learned from what not to do from Ray Caballero. But it was a good lesson.
Thank you. That's awesome. Do you ever feel as if though you struggle with self-confidence as it relates to beginning your political career? And if so, how do you overcome that, ma'am?
I think I've gotten so much better as I've gotten older with self-confidence. I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with. And I like, this is odd because it's not to do with politics necessarily, but it really helped me is I read in some book a long time ago about this exercise where you like look in the mirror and you try not to judge yourself. Like you just look and you like train yourself not to say anything mean or ugly about yourself. And then like over time you learn to like be like, hey, isn't she the bomb? She's so great. Like just to like, and that like weird exercise oddly I think has helped me just sort of like try to put away a lot of that like just like negative stuff that you hangs around you sometimes. And it's not perfect, but it that's something that's helped me kind of grow over time in a way that I think has been healthy. And I'm still judgy about myself, but I think I'm less judgy than I was before.
That's a very unique exercise. I think that's something all of us really need to integrate into our everyday routine. And with respect to being a woman, what are some of the biases that you face specifically being a woman in politics?
You know, I have a really hard time with this one because I would tell you that sometimes I think the only barrier is yourself, and some not that's not true. That because that's absolutely not true. But I have found, like, when I decided to run, I thought, you know, I'm young, you know, I don't, you know, I don't know if anybody really knows me. You know, should I really do this? And I feel like once I overcame that, I felt like in the neighborhood that I represent and have always represented, I've always just been a central area resident, whether it's for, I mean, representative, whether it was for the trustees or um, for the city council, that people were just ready for to embrace somebody that was young, somebody that was a woman. You know, they knew me. I grew up in the neighborhood, so a lot of people already knew me. And then as I ran again and again, people would know me. But you know, I think the other part of it too is I think there's this perception in politics that you shouldn't be yourself, really. Like that you should kind of come at it a little bit, you know, not to show all of your rough sides or your and I think I think people don't, well, you need to just let yourself be yourself and not worry about, you know, if people like you, they like you, and if they don't, they don't. Like, you know, so you you win or you lose, and it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're true to yourself. And so I can't think of any like specific things that I felt were barriers, but I felt I do feel that there's a real hunger in our community for young leadership. For at that time I was young. I'm not young anymore, but for, you know, for voices that are strong and passionate about our community. And so I'm not sure if I gave a great answer on that one, but maybe something will come to me.
Thank you. So, what advice do you have about bipartisan, nonpartisan working across the aisle with someone you may disagree with to get a job done?
So, you know, I think you know, one of the benefits that I had of working on a small board. So like when I was on city council, it was 8 people. I think 8 also for EPI, or 7 for EPISD. You and the mayor for, so there's 9. So that's a more manageable group to kind of work a majority out of for something. And so you know, that's my experience. Like I think I look at, for example, the congresswoman or, you know, our state representatives that have to go to these very large bodies and really think about how do I, you know, move the needle on something I really care about in an environment with that many people that you have to persuade. But I have always thought, and then the other thing about those 2 bodies is that they're all nonpartisan. And they're, or so when you run, you don't say I'm a Democrat or a Republican. I think probably most people on those boards ended up being or probably being Democrat just by the nature of the fact that we're a mostly Democratic community. But there were really some strong differences of opinion about many issues. And you know, locally, I always think that there's been sort of a strong kind of, you know, some people that really want to move forward and really strong progressive agenda. Some folks that say, well, yeah, but like maybe not that way. And, you know, there's always, you know, and at that time when I was on city council, there was this sort of a split, kind of a 4-4 split with the mayor kind of breaking with us on development issues. We really wanted to do better for neighborhoods. We wanted to build parks, for God's sake, and you know, that seemed to be like some, you know, very radical idea at the time. And so you know, you just sort of, my sense is what's really important if you want to do work, or if you have to do work where you need to build change, but you have to do it with people that are really different from you, is you just have to start by trusting who they are and why they come to the work, and that they are doing it for good reasons. And that's not always easy. You know, you want to say, oh, that guy just wants to get on TV, or, you know, he wants to do this, but you know, particularly for local office, it's a tough position. You know, they're not well paid, or they're volunteer positions. You just got to figure people are doing it for well-meaning reasons, and you have to work hard to appreciate that, because you sometimes don't always feel that. And I think you once you develop that kind of just willingness to appreciate that about each other, that builds a stronger base to be able to work from. So as an example, one of my sort of like and Judy will remember, on the city council, was Eddie Holguin was always sort of contrary to where we wanted to go on issues, but we ended up being really good friends, and I really appreciate him a lot. And I know he was there for all of the right reasons, and he knows the same about me. But you know, we didn't always agree, and we'd strongly disagree on the dais, and then we'd go back and chat and hang out and enjoy each other's company. So I do think I think the necessary ingredient for that kind of collaborative work on anything is that you have to just decide to trust the reason that person is doing what they're doing, and not try and second guess everything. You know, I think that's really important.
That's amazing advice. Thank you for that. How do you think we can best keep the youth, specifically young women, in the loop of the civic process and ready to run for office?
So you guys probably know that better than I do. I've been involved in politics for a long time, and I think that's always been, you know, especially having been involved in that campaign in 2001, where we had record numbers of voter turnout, particularly from young people. And what I learned from that is that people need to be inspired, right? Like they need somebody that's coming to the table with something that speaks to who they are as a person and what they feel needs to happen in their community. There needs to be a spark, you know. And you know, the other thing I've learned about campaigns, you know, you have very limited resources, you know, both from people and from the time perspective, both for the candidate, volunteers. So what happens over time is campaigns really only focus on those people that go out and vote. And because they only focus on those people that go out and vote, new voters are never engaged by campaigns. So there really has to be an effort outside of campaigns, I think, or a challenge to campaigns to begin to target more broadly, because a lot of people don't even know that there's an election happening. Actually, the congresswoman was telling me with this last race in November, she was really focused on getting, you know, low propensity voters out. And she was really amazed at how those voters even just needed some coaching about what it looks like when you get into the ballot box. Like, how do you, and so that's a lot of kind of one-on-one engagement to get people to go out and vote. And I think for running for office, what I have found is that there's just a lot of hesitation for running for office. It feels really scary, I think, for people to kind of put themselves out there in that way. And I think, you know, I'm glad to talk to anybody about it. I think it's not as scary once you get out there to actually do it, but you have to be really committed to one-on-one engagement, particularly in smaller races, in a city council race, in a school board race. It's just at the door where it happens. And I would argue for even the bigger races, it should be also at the door, but sometimes campaigns don't really scale that way. But I would encourage anybody to do it. I just think it's so important. And I think particularly for young people, there's really a lot of people out there that want to support young leaders and are, you know, we see this same folks and want a chance to have other people lend their gifts and their talents. So I think that's really important.
Thank you so much, Susie, for your answerings and your experiences. Right now, let's go ahead and move to Q&A session. And Josie, you got this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sophia. So as she mentioned, we are going to be answering some questions that the public has asked. And the first one is, we learned in your bio that you're working in partnership with UTEP's Aerospace Center. So Ms. Jimena Parada is curious to know if it has internship opportunities. Furthermore, why did you choose to work on this project, specifically in this field?
Like many things in my life, it's just sort of one of those things that a lot of it, I got into it because of my work actually with the Congresswoman as her district director. I've always been in my public service and in my elected service really interested in this two things that I think we have to solve as a community. One is we need to be paid better. We need for people in our community to have access to wages for a good day's work that allows them to sustain a family, to do the things that they want to do in life. And for too long, our wages have been way low. In fact, that it was an issue that Ray Caballero ran in 2001, and we've made some inroads, but we were so far behind. We have a lot of catch up there. The second thing is we have all that. You guys graduate from UTEP. You're like these incredibly talented people, and I know what it's like. I have young kids. It's hard to find, and I had experienced the same thing. Because of the wages and sometimes the lack of opportunity, it's hard to find something here. And so we really want to find a way and a path back for our talent to come back, and then also to recruit new talent to our community. And so those two things really are central to the work that we're doing with the Aerospace Center and with the Keck Center. And something that the Congresswoman had started when she was the county judge, a partnership with them. And it really grew out of, Dr. Shaduri, who's with the Aerospace Center, he's building this great path for very low income students to get into become aerospace engineers or mechanical engineers. And they just, they go off to these really great high paying jobs. There's no path for them to stay here. And the Congresswoman challenged him to figure out that path. So I got to work on that as the district director, and then it sort of transitioned into this full-time opportunity. So that's what I've been working on. And yes, for this effort, I want to have an intern. I haven't quite figured out what that looks like yet, but if you will get in touch with me, I'll put my email in the chat. I would love to talk to you about it and work on something.
Definitely, thank you for sharing that. The next question is actually from Professor Jimenez. I believe he is here in the call. He asked, what are the most immediate needs for vulnerable people in El Paso?
Boy, I think given the pandemic, it's really just the basics right now. I mean, it's access to food, it's access to a safe place to live, it's access to a safe in many ways. Not only that does it provide you comfort, but safe from anybody that would choose to do you harm. I think right now that is the real priority for vulnerable people, and something that needs to really be focused on. And I know that the Congresswoman is working on that. When I worked in the Congresswoman's office, we would get calls every day from just people that didn't have lost their job because of the pandemic, or just were not able to get by. So I think for vulnerable folks in our community, that's really and that was before the pandemic, but it's been made worse, obviously, because of it.
Yes, absolutely. And one of our members actually asked, what is the key to networking? What is some of your advice when it comes to networking?
So, what I have found, so I'm like not a natural networker in the sense, like I'm not going to go into a room and become like best friends with somebody, with everybody in the room. But I will, I will. What I've learned over time is if you're helpful to people, they're helpful to you back, and not because you shouldn't be helpful to people just because you want people to be helpful to you. But I've built a network over time of people that I know, that I've known for many, many years. And so if they need help, I help them. And sometimes something will come up and I'll call them up and the same. And so I feel like it's being mutually kind of helpful to people that for me is the key to networking. It's not just with I just want to know everybody and I want to connect with anybody. And I've been lucky in my life and in my career that I've had the opportunity to know all sorts of different people. So I want to be able to use that network of people I know to help other people.
I love that advice. You're definitely right. One more question that we got from Miss Judy Ackerman. She asked, how important is redistricting locally? What districts should we pay attention to, and how can we have an impact?
I feel like Judy could probably answer this question. She's been really a lead organizer in El Paso on this issue. And I think she is doing exactly what obviously we're concerned about the number of state representative seats that we'll have. We're concerned about how Texas 23, which is the congressional district just adjacent to Texas 16, which encompasses the city, how that will be impacted. So those are two important ones to look at. But the other, and Judy has been really active and participating in lots of opportunities at the state level where the decisions about the state representative districts and the congressional districts that's handled out of the state has been, getting on those calls, talking to her state representative. So honestly, Judy, I think you can answer that one better than me. But the other one I would just say to you for local races that I think is really important to pay attention to. So when the census gets their data back, the local jurisdictions also start to look at the local districts. So for the city council races, for the school board races, they take a look at those. And I think those are some really important areas. Like if you live in a district where you don't necessarily think that you're represented well by the people in that, for whatever reason, the way it's configured, I think it's really important to pay attention to those seats as well. There's a couple of districts I think that don't quite make sense. I don't know if I've ever known quite the solution for them. But I think one, for example, that I think about a lot from my experience on the trustees is I think it's District 1. So it includes like some sections of the west side, like Kern and the areas around UTEP, and then all of the south side neighborhoods. And because of turnout, it's always been that in those areas that they mostly get somebody from the west side to represent all of those areas, and they have really specific and different needs. So I think those are just, or we need to figure out a way to get turn up in the south side, which I think is another really important project and something to focus on. But I think those are other areas where those are your city council and your school board members make those decisions. So important ones to pay attention to.
Absolutely.
And look, Judy already gave us exactly how to get involved.
Love that. Thanks, Judy. We have one more question right here in the chat, and it says, what are some other issues that are most important to you?
So for me personally, I think for me, it's climate change. I think that's a really important thing. I think given everything, and actually the other one, and it started with Ray Caballero, it was something that he talked about a lot, and it's still really important, I think, is the border is so much maligned, the people of the border are so much maligned, and that language and that rhetoric has had significant consequences to people that live in this community or travel through our community. So we saw during the Trump administration what that leads to, and it's to me a real deep, dark, ugly dehumanization of people because of the color of their skin, and we as a community and as a nation really have to fight against that. And I think for our community, the way that we've chosen to fight back, that is really important, is that we, I know so many people that every chance they get, they just stick up for our community and talk about the pride they have in our community, and want to make sure everybody knows just how incredibly important this place is, not only to us, the people that live here, but to our nation, both for our identity, our culture, and for our economy. And so I think that's another one that I think for people that live along the US-Mexico border, and particularly in El Paso, which I like to think of as the capital of the US-Mexico border, that's a real challenge for us to really think through how to make sure that we're included in the conversations that really impact us the most. So whether it's immigration or border security policy or economic development or trade policy, that we're included in those conversations, but that it also is because we're so badass and amazing, and everybody wants to know about the secret ingredient that is El Paso, Texas. So those are the two things that are really important to me right now.
Definitely. Also, if anybody has any last minute questions. Oh,
can
go
I
ahead.
say one thing about that too? The other thing I think that's really important about those issues is it's really important to understand. I'm a big proponent for people running for local elected office. I just think you can make immediate, important, impactful things. So climate change is one of these things, I think, as an example, that it sometimes feels so big and so kind of existential that it almost makes you want to shut down, because you're just like, I don't even know how to get started. Like, what do I do here? And local office, you can, on those things that people sort of tend to think as national, international, obviously, issues, you really can do some very, very significant work that's not immediately, but much more quickly impactful than it would be in state office or federal office. So just want people to really think about, and there's a kind of an easier path in some ways to those offices for getting started in a race. So I would really encourage people to consider local office for that reason. We just need so much more talent. I've been a little bit discouraged about our local scene. I think we do have some good, talented folks, but I think we could really use some more strong, talented voices on the local scene.
That's actually perfect. That ties into our next question. So it's actually, have you worked on any environmental efforts? If so, can you talk about those a little bit? And what do you think about more selective forms of recycling?
Sorry. Yeah, I actually always in my work in office, I've worked on it. When I was on city council, we started the recycling program. So it went from, it used to be, it was just a neighborhood center thing. So if you wanted to, you chose to recycle, you had to go to like one of 8 neighborhood recycling centers. And what we learned when we adopted, we did a full citywide recycling program. There's a lot of appetite for recycling in our community. It just needed better access. Also worked when I was on city council with El Paso Electric to adopt more kind of solar friendly processes through the regulatory process. We didn't get very far at that time. I think there's been some more movement made there. they're sort of a reluctant adopter, or had been a reluctant adopter of solar and renewable. I think they're getting much more aggressive on that, but there's a lot of work to do there. And then when I was on the school board, worked on, with your facilities, you can do a lot more than people understand. So really, a key place to start with energy consumption for any of your facilities. So those were some areas where I focused.
Thank you. So that concludes our Q&A. Now I'm gonna hand it over to Malia.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josie. I just want to take a minute and thank Josie and Sophia and Andrea. You guys are amazing facilitators, and I'm so proud of how y'all continue to grow. So thank you guys so much. And of course, thank you to Susie Byrd.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, what did you say?
Oh, I was just going to let you say anything.
Okay, so I just want to thank you again for your time today. I'm glad to, if anybody wants to connect to me offline, I think I put my email in, maybe I didn't, I'll do it real quick, but I'm glad to connect with anybody that's interested in running for office. Love to connect with whoever, the person that asked the question on the internship program. But if you just need somebody that wants to, if you're interested, if you're thinking about it, you have some hesitation, I'm glad to talk you through what it looks like, what you need to think about as you prepare to run. And there's some really great resources for young women. Annie's List does some training that's really helpful. Emily's List, I think, does some training too. So those are some places to get started. Awesome. But thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much. And that's kind of a good segue. Normally we ended a little bit early today, but it's kind of a blessing in disguise. So we not only do this webinar just to provide information, but we do want to network and create connections so that we can build each other up and be successful in whatever field we're in. And so I wanted to give a quick shout out. We do also have Veronica Carvajal in our webinar right now, and she's actually going to be our March Women Who Ran. So thank you so much for joining us as well. And I'm going to put some information in the chat for our next, if you want to sign up for that Women Who Ran. And then also if there's any, I know that we have like a ton of students on this call, which is amazing. I think Naomi Furtman probably had a lot to do with that. And so if you want to join our org, we would be more than happy for you to join us. You can just click the link, the Mind Tracker link, and join us there. So that's all we officially have. I'm going to stop recording now.